I should have known when no one answered my calls from the hospital, because that was the moment I decided to make them all pay. It was a cold December morning, the kind where you can feel the frost on your skin as soon as you step outside. I was lying there in that sterile white hospital bed, in pain, helpless, desperate. The machine beeps rhythmically, marking the slow passage of time, but no one was there to hear it. My heart, as fragile as the fragile breath I was taking, kept asking the same question: why? Why was I alone? It wasn't supposed to be this way. I had spent years taking care of them, my family always there when they needed me, supporting my brother's business when it was struggling, backing my sister's failed investments, even bailing my brother-in-law out of his gambling debts. I was the one they always turned to, the one they relied on. But this was something different. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. 47 calls, 47 missed calls, and not a single one returned. I couldn't understand it. I thought of my brother Andrew, who I'd always had a strained relationship with. He was younger, more driven by ambition than loyalty, but I never thought he'd go this far. And then there was the son-in-law, Marcus, an opportunist who'd weaseled his way into the family through his marriage to my daughter Sarah. Always so polite, so grateful, acting like he was just happy to be a part of the family. But now I realized he was just playing his part, waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, I couldn't sleep. My eyes were red, swollen from tears that wouldn't come, my mind too consumed with confusion to allow me rest. I stared at the ceiling, my phone clutched tightly in my hand, waiting for one call, one voice, one sign that they cared, that they were coming to help me. But it didn't come, not from Andrew, not from Marcus, not from anyone. I kept replaying those missed calls over and over in my mind, each one a sharp reminder of my family's betrayal. My grandfather's fortune was sitting in a bank account, waiting for me to claim it, but it felt like a curse now. My family had turned their backs on me, and I couldn't just let it slide. I knew what I had to do. I would make them pay. Every last one of them. They wanted to see me fail, to think I was finished. Well, I wasn't done yet. As I lay there in that hospital bed, with the pain coursing through my veins and the silence of my family's absence suffocating me, a plan began to form: the inheritance. My $25 million inheritance wasn't just money. It was my weapon. It would be the one thing that would bring them to their knees. I wasn't just going to let them walk away with what was rightfully mine. No, this was about justice. This was about loyalty, and I was going to make sure they knew the price of betrayal. I closed my eyes for the first time that night, the idea starting to take root in my mind. The vengeance wouldn't be swift. It would be methodical. I wasn't going to lash out in anger. No, this would be something much worse. This would be calculated. They wouldn't see it coming. And that was when I decided there was no turning back. I was lying there in that hospital bed, alone, and the thought hit me: this inheritance could be my weapon. I never imagined it would come to this. After everything I did for them, this was how they repaid me. No calls, no messages, nothing. Not a single person from my family checked in. I felt the weight of it all, every hour, every minute, the loneliness slowly sinking in like a lead blanket. As the hours turned to days, I found myself thinking about all the years I had spent building my life around them. I had always believed loyalty was sacred. I was the one who picked up the pieces when they fell apart, the one who stepped up when no one else would. I could count countless times when they had needed me, and I was always there. But now I realized how fragile that bond had been. My brother Andrew, the one who always looked to me for advice and support, he was the first one to let me down. It wasn't just that he ignored me in my time of need. It was the fact that he'd been doing it for years behind the scenes. The resentment, the jealousy, it had always been there, simmering beneath the surface. He was never happy with his place in the family, always playing second fiddle to me, always overshadowed by my success, my stability. I never thought it would go this far, but now I saw it for what it truly was: betrayal by someone who had been waiting for the right moment to strike. And Marcus, my son-in-law? He was even worse. I always thought he was just happy to be part of the family. He played the part well, smiling at every family gathering, patting me on the back, telling me how much he admired my work. But now I saw the truth. Marcus wasn't grateful. He wasn't loyal. He was using my daughter as a stepping stone to secure his own future. When the inheritance came up, he had eyes on it. I'd seen the way he looked at my money, the way he acted like it was already his. The betrayal hurt more from him, because I had believed he truly loved my daughter. But love? It wasn't love. It was greed. As I lay there, isolated in that cold hospital room, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had done for them, every sacrifice, every ounce of loyalty I'd shown, had been in vain. It had all been taken for granted. I had thought that blood was thicker than water, but I was wrong. It was water that flowed freely, washing away everything I thought we had built together. And then, as if to rub salt in the wound, I realized something even more damning. The inheritance, the $25 million that my grandfather had left me. It wasn't just a financial windfall, it was a legacy, something that was meant to be shared, to continue the family name. But now I was left with nothing but a legacy of betrayal and a broken family, and that was when it hit me. I wasn't going to let them get away with it, not without consequences. The inheritance might have been my grandfather's, but I was the one who had earned it. My blood, sweat, and tears had been poured into my success, and I wasn't going to let them take that from me, not without a fight. The plan was beginning to form in my mind. It wasn't just about getting revenge, it was about righting the wrongs, about making sure they knew what they had done to me. Before I could make my move, though, I needed to get my hands on the evidence. I needed the phone records, the hospital bills, the emails and messages they had exchanged behind my back, making plans to take what was mine. But that would come later. For now, I had to let the anger simmer, to let the realization sink in that I had been played for a fool. I was going to get what was mine, and I was going to do it legally, methodically. They wouldn't see it coming. I thought of my daughter, Sarah. She had been one of the few who had always supported me. She was devastated by what had happened, but she wasn't going to sit idly by while her own family turned against me. She was going to help me gather the evidence I needed. My sister, too, had always stood by my side. I could count on them. They would be my allies in this fight. They were the ones who still cared, the ones who understood what loyalty meant. But Andrew? Marcus? They had shown me who they truly were, and now they would learn that there were consequences for betraying family. I wasn't set done yet, not by a long shot. I should have known then there was more to this than just ignoring my calls. By the time I left that damn hospital, something inside me had shifted. The pain from my injuries had long since faded, but the emotional scars left by my family's betrayal were just beginning to form. I was no longer the man who thought of family as sacred. I was someone else now, someone who understood that loyalty, once broken, could never truly be repaired. And as much as I hated it, I knew that the only way to heal was to make them pay for what they had done. The days after I returned home were a blur of silence and planning. I knew what I had to do, but I also knew that revenge wasn't something to rush into. No, this had to be done carefully, methodically. I couldn't afford to make mistakes. They wouldn't expect me to fight back. Not in the way I was planning. They would think they had won. And that's exactly how I wanted it. I needed them to underestimate me, to let their guard down. I reached out to my lawyer, John. He'd been the family lawyer for years, and though I hadn't spoken to him much in recent years, I knew he was the one person I could trust. When I told him the situation, he was shocked. He knew Andrew, Marcus, and the others, and he had always been the one to help with the family's legal matters. But this time, he wasn't on their side. I said I'll help you gather everything you need, John had said. I said I'll be honest though, I've never seen this side of your family. This is going to be tricky, Jason. But if there is subs one thing I know, it's subs that you subs right. You subs been wronged. And that was the thing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the betrayal went. It wasn't just about the inheritance. It wasn't just about the money they thought they could take from me. It was about everything I had done for them, everything I had sacrificed. They'd never once stopped to think about what I had given up. They took, and when I needed them the most, they were nowhere to be found. I needed evidence. That's where Sarah and my sister came in. Both of them had always been close to me, and they understood the gravity of the situation. I knew Sarah had the phone records. She'd kept them in case there was ever a reason to prove I wasn't crazy for thinking that I had been ignored. The hospital bills were another thing I needed. I'd been there for weeks, and they didn't even ask how I was doing. "Don't fit worry, Dad," Sarah said when I told her what I was planning. "I've got the phone records. I've been holding on to them just in case." She handed me the documents one evening when she came over to check on me. There they were, the proof I needed. 47 ignored calls, each one carefully marked with the date and time. I could practically hear the ringing in my ears again as I stared at the numbers. They hadn't even bothered to call back, not once. I slipped the phone records into my drawer, making sure they were safe. I spent the next few days digging into my family's finances. John had arranged access to the documents for the estate, and I knew exactly where to look. The bank statements, the will, the inheritance documents. I needed them all. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for my dignity, for my place in this family. I wasn't going to let them destroy me and walk away with everything I had worked for. As I pored over the documents, the truth became clearer. My brother had been siphoning money from the family estate for years, and Marcus, he was right there with him, acting like he was entitled to it. There were emails, contracts, and even hidden accounts they had set up to bypass me. I wasn't just being cut out of the inheritance. I was being robbed of everything that had been promised to me. I needed more, though. The real clincher would be the audio recordings. My brother and Marcus had been careless in their meetings, and Sarah, ever the strategist, had begun to quietly record their conversations. They thought she was too naive to understand what was going on. They thought she wouldn't catch on. But she did, and those recordings would be the nail in the coffin. I remember the first time I listened to one of the recordings. It was late, and I couldn't sleep. The house was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. I pressed play on my phone, and there it was, my brother's voice, low and conspiratorial, whispering about how easy it would be to cut me out of the inheritance. He didn't even care about me, not truly. It was all about control, about getting the power he felt he deserved. "Jason doesn't need the money." Andrew Sepp's voice dripped with contempt. Sepp's had everything handed to him on a silver platter. "We can take this, it's Sepp's ours, Marcus. We just need to act fast." My stomach twisted as I heard Marcus Sepp's response. I sit, with you. We sit, I'll make sure he sits out of the picture. He won't sit, even see it coming." I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the realization that they had been planning this for so long. For years I had given them my loyalty, my support, and they had taken it all for granted. They had been plotting behind my back, waiting for the right moment to strike. But now? Now the tables were turning. They didn't know it yet, but their own greed had given me the ammunition I needed. They were going to regret underestimating me. They were going to regret thinking they could take everything from me without consequences. I was ready. The evidence was in place. My lawyer was on standby. Sarah and my sister were working on gathering more proof, and I had the recordings to back it all up. The storm was coming, and they wouldn't even know what hit them. The pieces were falling into place, and I knew they had no idea what was coming. The calm before the storm never lasts. It never does. As the days passed, I could feel the pressure building inside me like a storm waiting to break. I had the evidence, the legal backing, the recordings, but there was still a sense of calm before the chaos. I wasn't just sitting on my hands, though. No, I was biding my time, letting them think they were in control. The first strike had to be subtle, almost imperceptible. They needed to feel like they were still winning, that they could still play their game. But I had other plans. I didn't tell anyone what I was about to do. Not Sarah, not my sister. The first move had to be mine. It had to come from me, something they wouldn't expect. The legal battle was important, but the groundwork for everything started with a small, quiet revelation. I'd known all along that Andrew was the one pulling the strings. He'd always wanted to be the one in charge, but he didn't have the guts to do it outright. He needed someone to back him up, and that's where Marcus came in. Marrying my daughter and positioning himself as an essential piece in the family's power structure. The fact that he was now actively working against me, conspiring with my brother, It only solidified the picture, but I was about to set that picture on fire. I started small. I sent an email to Andrew, acting like I was just another disgruntled family member looking to talk things through. I played it off like I was frustrated with the situation, tired of the silence. The email was innocuous enough, just a way to see how he would react. His response was quick, almost too quick. He told me everything I needed to know. "You're right, Jason. We should talk. I'm willing to sit down and discuss the inheritance. I'm sure you're just as upset as I am," the email read. It was exactly what I wanted. Andrew had given me a glimpse of his true intentions. His message was filled with subtle manipulation, a way of playing the victim while continuing to lay the groundwork for his own greed. He had no idea that I was playing him, not the other way around. I didn't stop there. I sent another email, this time a little more pointed. I referenced the phone records, the missed calls, all the things that had been bothering me for weeks. And I threw in a little bait, something about a family meeting where we could finally hash everything out. I'm tired of waiting, Andrew. I need answers. How do you plan to make this right? This situation is ested just about money. It sets about respect. I watched his response come in just hours later. "We shall figure this out. I don't think we need to involve anyone else just yet. I shall talk to Marcus, and we shall make sure you get what you deserve." It was a lie. A well-crafted lie, designed to keep me at arm's length while he and Marcus continued their plans behind the scenes. But I wasn't buying it anymore, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Now that I had Andrew exactly where I wanted him, I turned to the legal side. John, my lawyer, had been a huge help, and I could tell that he was beginning to get just as fired up about this fight as I was. He understood the stakes, and he knew that this was going to be a long, drawn-out battle. But he also knew that with the evidence I had, we had a real chance of exposing everything, every secret, every lie, every piece of Marcus and Andrew's treachery. I started reviewing the family estate's documents, looking for any discrepancies, any inconsistencies I could use. I pored over the will, the financial records, and every email trail that I had. Every single scrap of information mattered. It didn't take long to find something damning. A clause in the will that clearly showed Andrew and Marcus had been secretly altering things to benefit themselves. It wasn't just a matter of getting me out of the inheritance. They had been systematically working to alter the family's financial landscape for years. The inheritance wasn't just a final blow, it was part of their long-running scheme. I sent a copy of the will to John, highlighting the changes. "This isn't just a betrayal, John. This is fraud. They've been changing the will behind my back." John Sepp's response was quick and to the point. "We've got them. We need to act fast. But this is the kind of evidence that could take them down." It was time to take my plan to the next level. I called a family meeting. I knew that the best way to really shake things up was to confront them head on, to show them that I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd already laid the groundwork, and now it was time to let them think they were winning. When they walked into that meeting, they would think they had the upper hand. But they didn't know I had already set the trap. Andrew and Marcus walked in, full of confidence, ready to talk about the inheritance, no doubt already planning their next move. But I wasn't interested in negotiating anymore. I was done with games. I'd given them a chance to come clean, to try and fix things, but they had blown it, and now it was time for me to show them what I'd been working on. I handed them both a copy of the will, marked with all the discrepancies I had uncovered. I didn't say a word. I just let them look at it. The silence in that room was thick, suffocating. I could see the shock on their faces as they processed what they were seeing. I watched as their smug expressions faltered, and for the first time in months I felt something close to satisfaction. I had their attention, and that was just the beginning. I had the documents in hand. Now it was time to let them think they were winning. The truth always has a way of coming to light, no matter how much people try to hide it. I watched as Andrew and Marcus scrambled to cover their tracks, but it was too late. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. They had no idea what was coming. The web of lies they had spun was unraveling before their eyes, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. I had planted the seeds, and now it was time to watch them grow. I had the will, the financial records, The phone records and those damn recordings. Every detail, every small piece of evidence I had gathered over the past few weeks was adding up. Andrew thought he was playing the game, manipulating the situation in his favor, but I was 3 steps ahead. It was almost poetic. He was so sure of himself, so confident in his ability to deceive me, that he didn't even see the trap I'd set. I started sending more emails, this time with the evidence attached, to Andrew, to Marcus, to anyone who had a stake in this twisted game. I made sure they saw the discrepancies, the lies, the manipulations. I knew they wouldn't be able to ignore it. It was all there, right in front of them. The will changes, the bank transactions, the meetings they had secretly held. I wasn't just exposing them for the inheritance theft. I was exposing their greed, their selfishness, and their utter disregard for me as family. When I sent the email to Andrew, I knew he'd read it. I knew he'd see everything laid out in black and white. The evidence was irrefutable. No matter how much he tried to cover his tracks, the truth was there, and that was when the walls really started to crumble. Jason, we need to talk. His email came in almost immediately. This isn't set what you think. We can work something out, but you need to stop all of this. It was a desperate plea, one that showed just how much panic was setting in. But it was too late. I had already won. The damage was done. I didn't respond to his email. I didn't need to. I knew that the more I stayed silent, the more he would dig himself into a hole. Marcus, too, had started to feel the pressure. His emails were more frantic now, filled with apologies and promises to make things right. But there was no making it right. Not anymore. Sorry, Jason. I never meant for it to go this far. Marcus Sips's message read, "Please let Sipses talk before things get out of hand." But nothing could fix this. I knew they were both hoping for some kind of negotiation, some way to walk away without consequences. They were looking for an easy way out, but they weren't going to get it. I had no intention of playing nice anymore. Not after everything they had done. Sarah and my sister Andrea were my partners in this. They were the ones who helped me gather the final pieces of the puzzle. They had seen through Andrew and Marcus's facade for years, but now the truth was undeniable. Andrea helped me track down more evidence, more hidden transactions, more emails that linked Marcus to the schemes. Sarah was the one who had started recording the family meetings, and those recordings were gold. They showed Andrew and Marcus plotting against me, discussing how to take everything for themselves while keeping me in the dark. The recordings were crucial. They didn't just show the betrayal. They captured the manipulation, the cold, calculated way they spoke about me behind my back. They didn't even try to hide it. The arrogance in their voices was shocking, but it was that arrogance that would ultimately be their downfall. I contacted John, my lawyer, with the final pieces of evidence. He couldn't believe it. "This is more than I expected, Jason. Yuspev got them dead to rights. We need to move quickly. We are going to make sure they can set Wiggle out of this." And just like that, the plan was in motion. With the evidence in hand, the truth about Andrew and Marcus was now public. The next step was inevitable. The court filings would begin. The legal battle was about to get ugly. But I was ready. No amount of pleading or apologies could undo the damage they had done. I sat there in my office, staring at the documents on my desk. My phone buzzed with another email from Andrew. I didn't even bother reading it. I had already won. But the feeling inside me wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't joy. It was something different. A sense of closure, of peace. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing this because it was the only way to restore the balance. I had been wronged, and now I was making it right. I had already planned the next steps. The legal filings were going to be my next strike. But I couldn't help but think about the impact it would have on the family. My heart sank as I thought of my daughter Sarah. This was going to tear us all apart, but I had no choice. I couldn't let them take everything from me, not after everything I had done for them. When they found out the truth, they didn't just lose their inheritance, they lost me. The moment I realized I wasn't just fighting for money was when the guilt set in. The legal battle, the mounting evidence, the recordings, it all felt like a blur now, a distant memory from the man I used to be. I wasn't just fighting for the inheritance anymore. I was fighting to reclaim something deeper. My dignity, my place in the family, my pride. I sat in my office late one night, the harsh fluorescent lights flickering overhead as I sifted through the final documents. The files were spread out in front of me: evidence, contracts, bank records, everything I'd gathered over the past few weeks, everything I'd been working toward. The weight of it all hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. I couldn't help but think of Sarah. She had stood by me through this entire ordeal, never once wavering in her support. But I knew this was taking a toll on her. She had been my rock, my ally in this fight, but I could see the pain in her eyes. She didn't want to see her family torn apart. Neither did I. But the damage had already been done. They had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. "Dad, I know you starred doing the right thing," Sarah had said to me earlier that week. "But I can set help but feel like I set losing my family. I don't set want to be part of this war." I understood. But in my heart, I knew this wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. This was about justice. This was about showing them that betrayal, at its core, had consequences. I could feel the weight of the decision as I turned to the stack of documents on my desk. The final court filing was ready. It was time to push forward. I had done everything by the book. Every step of the way, I had made sure that my moves were calculated, measured. I wasn't going to give them any chance to twist the narrative in their favor. The court was my battlefield, and I was going to win this. John, my lawyer, had been working relentlessly by my side. The strategy was clear: expose everything. The discrepancies in the will, the shady financial dealings, the email exchanges. We had it all, and we were ready to take it to court. But the hardest part was yet to come. "Jason, I've been going over the documents," John said one evening. "This is going to get ugly. There's no way Andrew and Marcus can hide from this. But I'm warning you, this is going to take everything you have. The family will never be the same." I knew that. But at this point the family had already crumbled. What was left of it was a facade, a lie. They had tried to tear me down, and now it was my turn to fight back. I wasn't going to let them get away with it, not after everything I had sacrificed. I prepared myself for what was about to happen. The legal filings would go in the next day, and from there the countdown would begin. The showdown would be inevitable. The courtroom was set, the legal strategy in place, and I wasn't going to stop until they faced the consequences of their actions. But there was one thing I hadn't prepared for: the weight of what this would cost me, the emotional toll, the isolation. The people I had trusted for so many years, the ones who were supposed to be there for me, were the very ones who had betrayed me. And now I was about to tear down the walls of our family, brick by brick. Sarah wasn't the only one who had been affected. My sister Andrea had been an invaluable ally in all of this. She had kept me grounded when the anger threatened to consume me. But even she was starting to question whether this was worth it. Every day I could see the strain on her face, the way she hesitated before making decisions, knowing that once we exposed everything, nothing would be the same. I had to remind myself why I was doing this. It wasn't just for me, it was for everything I had lost: my integrity, my trust, my place in this family. They had taken it all, and now it was time to take it back. But I also knew that this wasn't going to be a clean win. The fallout was going to be catastrophic. My daughter would never see her uncle the same way again. My sister would be caught in the middle, torn between me and her loyalty to the family, and Andrew and Marcus. They would be exposed for what they were: selfish, opportunistic, willing to destroy everything for the sake of money and power. Still, I couldn't back down. I had come too far. There was no more turning back. The court filings went in the next day, and the countdown began. I had done everything by the book, every step carefully planned, every document in order. It was time for Andrew and Marcus to face the consequences of their actions. And as I sat there staring at the final document, I realized that the fight wasn't just for the inheritance anymore. It was for something much deeper: justice. The family might be broken, but I wasn't. Not anymore. I was ready. They had no idea what they were about to walk into. The courtroom felt different from what I imagined. I'd always thought of it as this grand, sterile place where emotions were set aside in the name of the law. But as I stepped into the room, the weight of it all hit me. The echoes of my footsteps, the cold steel of the jury box, the sharp clack of the judge's gavel, all of it felt so final. The reality of what was happening crashed over me. There was no turning back now. I glanced around the room. The opposing side, Andrew and Marcus, sat at their table, smug smiles on their faces as if they were already the victors. They thought they had me cornered. They thought they could manipulate the situation the way they had done their entire lives. But what they didn't know was that I had spent the last few months planning every move carefully. I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to bury them. John, my lawyer, sat beside me, his face calm but determined. He was confident, and that gave me strength. We had everything we needed to win this case. The will discrepancies, the financial records, the hidden transactions, and, of course, the recordings. Everything we had collected had led to this moment. I could feel the tension rising as the trial began. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp gaze, called the court to order. Her voice cut through the tension like a knife. We are here today to discuss the validity of the inheritance left by Thomas Matthews to his son Jason Matthews. Let Seps proceed with the opening statements. Andrew's lawyer stood first, his posture impeccable, his voice smooth and practiced. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a straightforward matter. My client Andrew Matthews has every right to claim his share of the inheritance. There's no reason why he should be excluded from his father's estate. We'll demonstrate that the will was altered without consent, and my client stands to inherit what is rightfully his. Andrew sat there, his face a picture of feigned innocence. He was playing the role of the victim, as he always did, but I could see the cracks in his facade. He was nervous, though he tried to hide it. The truth was, he didn't expect me to fight back. He didn't expect me to come to this courtroom with proof. Proof that would destroy him. Marcus's lawyer followed suit, speaking with a similar air of authority. Marcus Matthews is a man of integrity. He has always supported his family, and it is not for lack of love or loyalty that he has been kept from his rightful inheritance. We will show that Jason Matthews, despite being the eldest, has no legal standing to make decisions about the family fortune. Marcus is simply asking for what is fair. Marcus sat there, arms crossed, eyes darting from the judge to the jury, his smirk barely hiding the panic underneath. He wasn't as calm as he appeared. I could see the sweat on his brow, the tightness in his jaw. He was scared. He should be. John stood when it was our turn. His voice was steady, unwavering, as he began to lay out our case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the facts speak for themselves. Jason Matthews was the sole heir to his grandfather's estate. There are no disputes over that. But what we have here is a classic case of betrayal. Andrew Matthews and Marcus Matthews, both of whom Jason has supported his entire life, have conspired behind his back to alter the will and steal what rightfully belongs to him. The room went silent as John presented the first piece of evidence, the altered will. He displayed it on the screen for everyone to see. The signatures forged, the changes made without my knowledge. I watched as the jury shifted in their seats, their eyes wide with shock. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected to see the truth laid bare like this. Then came the financial records, the hidden accounts, the money siphoned off from the estate over the years. Andrew's manipulation was clear. He had been using his position to benefit himself, making illegal transfers, hiding assets. Marcus, too, was implicated in the financial schemes. Their greed knew no bounds. I could see the realization hit the jury like a ton of bricks. They were starting to see what I had known all along, that my family had betrayed me for money, for power. But it was the recordings that brought the final hammer down. John played the tapes, Andrew and Marcus discussing their plans, their betrayal. The jury listened in silence as my brother and my son-in-law's voices echoed through the courtroom. Their arrogance, their cold calculations, it was all there. And I could feel the tide turning. This was it. This was the moment they would pay for everything. Ladies and gentlemen, John said, his voice carrying through the room, this isn't just about money, this is about loyalty, about respect, about family. Jason Matthews has given everything for his family, and in return he's been betrayed by those he trusted the most. It's time for the truth to come to light, and for Andrew Matthews and Marcus Matthews to face the consequences of their actions. The silence in the room was deafening. Even Andrew, who had been so sure of himself, seemed to shrink in his seat. Marcus's eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. They had never expected me to come prepared, never expected me to fight back the way I did. The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity. I sat there tense, every muscle in my body wound tight. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, the silence of the courtroom almost suffocating. I knew this wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for every person who had ever been betrayed by their own blood. It was about holding them accountable. It was about justice. And then, after what seemed like hours, the jury returned. The foreman stood, his face serious. We, the jury, find in favor of Jason Matthews. The will is deemed valid, and the inheritance will go to the rightful heir. Andrew Matthews and Marcus Matthews are to be removed from any claim to the estate. The room erupted in a quiet murmur, but I barely heard it. I was still processing the words, still trying to wrap my mind around what had just happened. My hands trembled as I sat back in my chair. I had done it. I had won. Andrew and Marcus's faces were a picture of disbelief and rage. They had been so sure of themselves, so certain that they could take what wasn't theirs. But now they had lost everything, and it was all because of their own greed. I stood up, my eyes fixed on them. You didn't just lose the inheritance, I said, my voice cold and steady. You lost me. And in that courtroom I saw the look in their eyes. It was fear, and that sips when I knew I had won. The moment the jury's verdict came down, I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. The anger, the betrayal, the uncertainty, all of it seemed to vanish in that instant. I had done it. I had fought back, and I had won. The $25 million inheritance was mine, as it should have been all along. My family, the ones who had turned their backs on me, had lost everything, and I had brought them to their knees. But as I stood there in the courtroom, the triumph didn't feel as sweet as I thought it would. It didn't bring the relief I had imagined. In fact, it felt empty. There I was, surrounded by the chaos of victory, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I should have been celebrating, right? I should have been basking in the glory of what I had achieved. After all, I had fought for this, for the inheritance that was mine by right. I had fought for justice, for my family's betrayal to be exposed, for the truth to come to light. I had won, and they had lost. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. But the victory didn't feel like a victory at all. It felt like the end of something, something I wasn't sure I wanted to lose. It was as if the courtroom had sucked the life out of me. I had spent so much time and energy focusing on what was right, on getting back what I had lost, that I hadn't stopped to think about the cost, the toll this had taken on me emotionally, on my relationships with Sarah, my sister, and even the rest of my family. Yes, they had betrayed me, but in the end, wasn't I still the one who had to carry the weight of that betrayal? I sat in my office later that night, staring at the papers on my desk, the inheritance now legally mine. The thought of what this money could do for me, what it could mean for my future, didn't excite me. It didn't fill the hole that had opened up inside me over the course of this battle. The documents were signed, the court case was over, and the money would soon be transferred into my account. But all I could think about was the price I had paid to get here. Sarah called later that evening. I hadn't spoken to her much since the trial, and I could hear the strain in her voice. Dad, I am glad it set's over, but I don't set to know if I am glad how it ended. I know, I said quietly, running a hand through my hair. I feel the same way. I know you had to do it, she said softly. But now that it's done, do you feel like you won? I paused, letting her words hang in the air. Did I feel like I had won? I had spent so long fighting for justice, for retribution, but now that it was over, the victory felt hollow. I didn't know how to explain it to her, but I realized in that moment that I had spent so much time trying to prove something to my family, to show them that I was worth something, that I had forgotten about the person who mattered most, myself. I don't sit no, I replied, my voice distant. I thought I would feel different. I thought getting everything back would fix it all, but it hasn't set. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing the weight of it all. The win, the justice, the emotional toll. Dad, Sarah said quietly, I think Yusef lost more than just the inheritance. Yusef lost the family, and no amount of money can bring that back. Her words hit me like a slap in the face, but she was right. The truth was, I had been so consumed by the idea of revenge and justice that I hadn't stopped to think about what it would cost me. I had won the legal battle, but I had lost my family in the process. My brother and my son-in-law were gone, their reputations in tatters. But what about the people who had always been by my side? My sister, my daughter, they had been dragged into this too, caught in the crossfire of my fight. And for what? The truth was, I had won, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like the end of an era of family, of loyalty, of love. And when I looked at the inheritance sitting on my desk, I realized that it was just money, a piece of paper. Something that had once meant security, legacy, and pride now felt like an empty symbol. I stared out the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. The night was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the world had stopped turning. I thought about the future. I thought about what I would do with this money, what my life would look like now. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the price I had paid to get here, the people I had lost, the trust I would never get back, the family I had once known, now reduced to broken fragments. And in that moment, I knew that the greatest loss wasn't the inheritance. It wasn't the money or the house or the power. It was the loss of who I used to be, the man who believed in loyalty, the man who trusted his family. That man was gone now, replaced by someone else. Someone who had learned the hard way that sometimes justice isn't enough. I had my revenge, I whispered to myself. But it didn't thus feel like the victory I imagined. I had my revenge, but it didn't set feel like the victory I imagined. It's funny how life works out sometimes. You think that when you win, everything will fall into place. You imagine that once you've taken back what's yours, the pieces of your life will finally snap together. But as I sat there in the silence of my home, I realized that the hardest part wasn't the fight itself. It was the aftermath. The inheritance was mine. The court had ruled in my favor. Andrew and Marcus were out of the picture. They were no longer a threat. But as the days passed, I found myself staring at the check, the bank statements, the inheritance documents, and none of it brought me the peace I thought it would. I should have been happy. I should have felt like I had reclaimed what was rightfully mine. But all I could think about was the cost. My family was shattered. Andrew and Marcus had lost everything. But I wasn't sure if that victory felt like the triumph I'd imagined. I had been so consumed by revenge that I hadn't taken a moment to think about what would come after. Sarah had been my rock through this whole ordeal. She had stood by me when I was at my lowest, but I could see the toll it was taking on her too. She'd never wanted this, never wanted to see her family torn apart over money. And now, even though we had won, I could see the distance between us growing. Das I'm glad you are not the one they took advantage of, Dad, she said one evening, her voice soft, almost as if she were trying to comfort me. But I hate what this has done to us. I hate that it's come to this. Yusef lost your brother, your peace, and everything that made you who you were. I knew she was right. I had won the battle, but at what cost? The family I once knew was gone, replaced by strangers, by people I couldn't trust. Andrew's and Marcus's greed had destroyed what little was left of the family bond, and now, even with the inheritance safely in my hands, I was left with a sense of emptiness that I hadn't anticipated. But I wasn't about to let this define me. No, the victory didn't come with the satisfaction I thought it would, but it did come with something else, a chance to reclaim my life. This was the turning point. The inheritance was just money. It wasn't the key to happiness. I had to rebuild. I had to reclaim my sense of peace, my identity, my future. I turned away from the stack of legal documents and financial statements on the table. It was time to move forward. I spent the next few weeks focusing on myself. I took a step back from the world I had been so entrenched in, the world of betrayal, courtrooms, and manipulation, and I started rebuilding my life. I bought a new place, a small, quiet apartment in the city. Something simple. something that felt like a fresh start. I didn't need a mansion, didn't need the sprawling estate. I didn't need all the luxury that came with the inheritance. What I needed was peace, and slowly I was starting to find it. Sarah was there with me every step of the way. She helped me pack up my things, offered her support when the weight of everything felt too much. I knew she was still struggling, but we were getting through it together. The bond between us hadn't been broken. It was stronger now, forged through the fire of everything we had endured. I spent more time with Andrea, too. My sister, the one person who had always understood me, she had been my sounding board through this whole ordeal. Her support had kept me grounded when everything else was falling apart. And though the legal battle was over and the inheritance was mine, it was the emotional support from her that I needed most now. The money, the inheritance. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I was free. I was no longer chained to the past, to the family that had betrayed me. I was starting to rebuild something new, something better. As the weeks passed, I began to take stock of what I had gained, not just in terms of wealth, but in terms of myself. I had taken back my dignity, my self-respect. I wasn't defined by the inheritance or the fight that had consumed my life for so long. I was defined by my ability to move forward, to let go of the anger, the bitterness, and to finally start healing. I no longer cared about the house, the fortune, or the legacy of the Matthews family. What mattered was the relationships I had left, the people who still cared about me, who still saw me for who I truly was, not for the inheritance I was entitled to. One evening, Sarah and I sat in my new apartment, looking out at the city skyline. The world was moving on, and so was I. "You didn't lose me," I said to her, my voice steady. "You gave me away, and that was the best thing you could have ever done." She smiled, the tension between us finally starting to ease. "I know, Dad. I know." And in that moment, I understood that true redemption doesn't come from revenge or from claiming what's rightfully yours. It comes from letting go of the anger, of the pain, of the people who tried to tear you down. It comes from finding peace in yourself, not in things. I had my justice, and now I had my peace. I didn't need them. I had my justice. Time has a way of healing wounds you didn't think could ever close. The days that followed the legal battle were quieter than I ever imagined they'd be. The chaos, the anger, the rage that had burned inside me for so long, it all started to fade. It wasn't that the memories of what Andrew and Marcus had done to me were gone. They weren't. That I had learned something far more important in this journey. Redemption doesn't come from seeking revenge. It comes from letting go. I had spent so many years believing that I had to fight for everything, that I had to win at all costs. I had convinced myself that justice was something I could take by force. But as I sat in my new apartment, in the stillness of the city night, I realized that I had already won in ways I hadn't expected. The inheritance, the fortune, those were just things. They didn't define me. They never had. What defined me was my ability to stand up for myself, my ability to reclaim what was rightfully mine, and most importantly, my ability to let go. I hadn't expected to feel this way. I thought the victory would bring me peace. I thought the moment I stood in that courtroom, watching Andrew and Marcus crumble under the weight of their lies, I'd feel vindicated. But I didn't. The victory didn't bring me closure. The truth, when it was finally revealed, didn't heal the wounds. What healed the wounds was walking away, letting go of the anger, letting go of the pain, and starting to rebuild my life from scratch. I thought I would spend the rest of my life angry at them, but I realized something crucial: the anger, the hurt. It was only keeping me trapped in the past. I couldn't move forward if I kept holding on to what they had done. I couldn't find peace if I kept living in that place of betrayal. And so, slowly but surely, I let go. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to pick up the phone and call Sarah, tell her how much I hated what had happened. I wanted to scream at her for making me go through this, making me face the family I had loved, only to see them tear me apart. But every time I felt that urge, I reminded myself of something that Sarah had told me after the trial. "Dad, you have been through hell. But you have made it through, and you have made it through stronger. We don't have made it through stronger. We don't have made to keep dragging this on. You have got the truth. You have got the justice. You have got yourself. That's all that matters now. Her words echoed in my mind as I spent more time alone, more time reflecting on the journey that had led me to this moment. I had fought to expose the truth. I had fought to make them pay, but now I realized that the fight I had been waging wasn't just against them, it had been against myself. Against my own unwillingness to let go, my inability to forgive. The truth was, the only thing that was ever holding me back was me. I had spent so long focusing on what I'd lost, my family, my trust, my legacy, that I forgot about what I still had. Sarah, Andrea. My ability to rebuild, my ability to move on. I spent more time with Sarah in the weeks after the trial. It wasn't easy. The scars ran deep, and we both knew that nothing would ever be the same. But we tried. We tried to rebuild what had been broken. I took her to dinner one evening, just the two of us. And for the first time in a long time, we laughed. We talked about things other than the past. We talked about the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Andrea, too, had become a pillar of support. We had always been close, but now there was a new understanding between us. We didn't have to talk about the trial to know what we both felt. We just moved forward together, and that was enough. And as I began to rebuild, I realized something. Letting go wasn't about forgiveness in the way I thought it was. It wasn't about saying what Andrew and Marcus did to me was okay. It wasn't about accepting their betrayal. It was about freeing myself from the chains of that anger, freeing myself from the need to punish them. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their acknowledgement. I didn't need them at all. I had everything I needed right here, right in front of me. And in the end, that's what true redemption is. Not about seeking revenge, not about holding on to the past, but about letting go of the things that weigh you down, about finding peace in yourself, even when the world around you is falling apart, about moving forward, even when it feels like you've lost everything. I looked at the inheritance documents one last time, then set them aside. I wasn't going to look at them again. They didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was the life I was going to build. A life where I could finally breathe again, where I could finally live without the burden of betrayal and anger hanging over my head. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting off my shoulders. I had my justice, I had my peace, and I had my life back.